Figured now's a good time to make a follow-up video. It's been 3 months since I posted the original video. Part of the reason I've been waiting was because I really wanted at least one of the investigations to come to a conclusion before posting, because I wanted to summarize that. But I feel like I'm like forgetting a lot of the small details that I think are pretty important, and people are wondering. And I made the other one probably a week or so after the incident, so a lot of stuff has kind of changed, and anyway, it felt like a good time to just kind of throw something out there. I have retained legal counsel, a civil rights attorney named Chris. He has agreed to do it pro bono, which I greatly appreciate, and that's lifted a lot of stress off of me. So he's advised me throughout the process, and then he's formally been there with a handful of things. This is going to be like the previous video. I'll try to front load all the kind of firm specifics around what's happening with the investigations, and then afterward I'll kind of go into the more nuanced stuff. If you're not interested in those pieces or my opinion on a lot of stuff, you can just skip it after that. So the internal affairs investigation, it's basically done, is what it seems like. I did my interview for it with a detective who he then talked to. He got like license plates and stuff from people in my video, and called them and contacted people, and another person had a video kind of driving by me, who they reached out to. I don't think they saw much, but they just recorded basically me with my hands up. It's waiting for a major to decide on what to do. Now, apparently the investigation is going very quickly, even though it's been 3 months. I called them the other day. They apparently have up to 6 months. They let me know they have up to 6 months to complete an investigation like this, which is an incredibly long time, in my opinion. Even 3 months seems like a long time, but I guess that's just the speed these things work at. So at any moment, I guess I'm supposed to get a call from the major deciding what they decided to do from an internal perspective. Again, that will be demotion, termination, reprimands, nothing, depending. And a reminder, previously John Urquhart, the sheriff, told me that he did not expect him to be terminated. But again, this is all their decision. The criminal investigation has been more intense and more complex. Just as a refresher, the two investigations are completely separate because the detective is compelled to make a statement on the procedural as to why he did what he did, but he's not for the criminal. So that's to ensure that his Fifth Amendment rights are not infringed upon, because again, he probably won't make any statements about the criminal one. That would be very bad. It's unlikely he would be able to say something truthful that would help him. So after I gave my statement, they gave that information to the King County Prosecutor's Office, who would make a decision on whether criminal charges can be filed. Now, they contacted me, and with my attorney, we made an arrangement for me to make a recorded statement with them, as well as hand over the memory card to my GoPro, in case they can get more than whatever I provided as part of the video that I created. So if you have concerns that I was recording longer, or that there's something that I recorded that is going to be a justification for what that guy did, I am cooperating fully with their investigation. So that will be known. You know, that's now a part of it. So if you had concerns that I was going to railroad this detective to protect myself from some severe thing that I was trying to get out of, you can rest assured that that's not what's happening. I have been given immunity from any and all traffic infractions. So because this guy did a really crappy thing, if I was doing something, then maybe they would try to threaten me in order to get me to drop all charges and make this all go away. That's the only thing I was afraid of. I wasn't afraid of anything else. I'm not afraid of anybody seeing what I do and thinking I'm an asshole for how I drive or how I've driven in the past or the things that I've done. It's not really a concern for me. I was really only concerned about the legal repercussions and ramifications that somebody would try to go through and take my memory card and then try to, like, every time I made like an improper lane change or something, and count that up and then threaten me with, thousands of dollars in fines and potential jail time or whatever, or lose my license or something. So that's not going to happen now. So I was fully cooperative. I told them everything. Again, even in every statement I've given, in every interview I've given, you can probably find that almost every detail is identical. There are a handful of details that I was not entirely forthcoming with because one, they weren't really that relevant to what happened because they don't really change the facts. And two, again, it was just about protecting myself initially until I got that immunity. So now that I have immunity, I have no fear of that. So I gave them the memory card. They gave it back to me. They've extracted whatever data they thought was relevant. They haven't told me what they extracted or if they got anything. We'll see. The GoPro software automatically deletes any data after you extract it from the memory card. That's a setting that I have enabled because it makes my life easier. It was deleted as soon as I moved it off to put it into a YouTube video. So if they were able to forensically extract that, that's what they'll have. They're supposed to make a decision on that any day now. I've been waiting. It's holidays, probably. There's probably people in and out, but they're taking it directly to the DA, the King County District Attorney, to make a decision. So we'll see where that goes. I made sure to bring up the things that people brought up to me about, for example, how I was pulled over by a car that didn't meet appropriate standards for a police vehicle, which I think is a good point. Some states have rules and regulations where if you're not sure if you're being pulled over by somebody who's a legitimate police officer of the law, you can drive to a police station and then stop there to ensure that you are actually, that you're not being taken by somebody who is a fraud, attempting to try and get a bribe or worse. So that's why those types of rules are important, and I think they are important. So we'll see where that goes. Again, nobody's told me specifics, and nobody promises or none of the detectives or anybody has said, we agree with this, that this is not right, or this was against this statement. So I also screwed up assault and battery. I transposed them. Thank you to the people who commented and let me know that. So anyway, look it up for yourself. So that's it. That's where we're at. Now, I've learned a lot of stuff, again, through my own investigation and following up with other people's advice and instructions. I was harangued by a lot of people online, sending me private messages and threats, and I hope they subpoena your whole YouTube history, all your videos, and prosecute you for all that stuff, like there was anything really that bad, or that they would ever do that. Again, that would kind of appear externally to other people that they were trying to do it to get revenge for me coming forward with this information. Again, most people would probably say is probably not a good way to do this, and we should probably handle this, and you probably shouldn't go after the victim. One more interesting thing was there's a social network called Nextdoor, which is like you have to be verified that you live in a specific location, and so it actually connects people in your physical neighborhood within a couple mile radius or whatever, depends on your settings. I had kind of I'd see people talking about it in Nextdoor, and so I kind of piped in and said, because this saw some of the common misconceptions and misinformation, so I piped in and said, hey, like, let me clarify some things for you that you kind of have a little screwed up, that's kind of changing your perspective. And then some people kind of hated on me again, and so I offered, I said, hey, if you want to talk about it, I'd be happy to meet you and talk to you in person, because we live next to each other, and you might see me, like, walking my dog, and I don't want you to, like, again, like, most of it is, I don't know if there's, like, a crazy person around here who might try to physically hurt me. So I want to, jump in front of jump on that grenade. But two, again, it's like I don't want people thinking I'm somebody or something that I'm not because of a misconception. If they meet me and hate me, okay, that's fine. But I don't want them using, half-truths or incorrect info. But I started talking to this person, and they were I think they didn't think I would actually offer it up, which I did. But they accused me of things that I have never done. So, for example, they said that they had seen me on my bike with a girl on the back, like speeding and ripping through in an unsafe manner the neighborhoods. And two, that they saw me like flipping people off in the middle of the highway, kind of for no reason, kind of just being, I guess, an agitator, which was surprising to me because I don't think I've had anybody on the back of my bike. Probably, since I've lived here at least. I have another bike that I ride because it's my Buell. It's more upright and it's way more comfortable to ride with another person. I don't ride with other people on the back of the street bike. It's very uncomfortable for the passenger. So I was like, that's not really correct. Explained that, and then also, I don't really get road rage. I don't have road rage. I don't really experience that the way that some people do. I don't really get personally. I know a lot of motorcyclists find it frustrating when people either don't see them and maybe almost hit them, but I don't. Again, I ride in such a way that I'm predicting that and expecting that from people, so it's more a nice thing when they don't accidentally hit me, because it's mostly because they're just not blind spot checking or head checking. But I don't get personally offended by that. I kind of understand that, so I kind of just move on. But So the idea that I would like flip people off rapidly on the highway, I mean, I can't prove that, and just the same as they can't prove it was me, but I can very confidently say that they're definitely not me. This is kind of part of the thing where I was talking about where people were kind of filling me with all the things they had seen other writers do, or everybody with a black bike that has ever done something negative, and then kind of throwing that on me, not realizing there's a lot more than just me around here writing. They kind of seemed to calm down, and then that was it, and they didn't care to meet me, but they didn't talk smack about me anymore. So another interesting thing from the comments was that there seems to be a commonality between people who support the detective's actions. Is there's kind of this myth of the hyper-competent police officer, the hyper-competent cop. So for example, some person said that the reason that he probably pulled a gun on me was I said last time that I have a concealed carry, so he ran my plate and then somehow cross-referenced that with concealed carry permits, and then because of I had a concealed carry permit, it means I might have had my gun on me, and so that means if somebody has a gun on them, then you should come with your gun drawn, because it means they're likely to draw it on you, I guess, is kind of the logic behind that, which is flawed in a lot of ways, because first off, this guy only ran my plate, and that's it. I know for a fact that's all he did. So he definitely was not drilling down into other things. I wasn't carrying my gun. Again, he didn't reference any of that. And even if he did, I mean, this is America. Our current interpretation of the Second Amendment is that if I've got a legal concealed carry, I mean, I can carry a firearm. You can open carry a firearm pretty much anywhere other than certain pieces of like public property in the schools and stuff like that. That's what it's like here. I mean, this is all legal, and it's none of that is a justification, not a valid justification for a law enforcement officer to draw a gun on you. So, but yeah, a lot of people just think that there are the police officers out there that are doing these things. They're thinking 3 or 4 or 5 steps ahead, as opposed to Occam's razor, which is that they are just kind of incompetent or not thinking clearly or rationally in the moment, which is the reality of the situation. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm sure that there are very smart cops out there. I'm sure it's like every job. 10% of the people around you are probably very good at their job. Maybe 1% are rock stars. 80% of people are just some variance of fine, mediocre, some on the worst side, some on the better sides. I mean, even in talking to the detectives about this stuff, they seem like competent guys, but when I asked them details about certain laws and specifics, they didn't know the answers, and they told me they were gonna have to go research it the same way that I would. They don't know things off the top of their head because they're just human. It's just human beings. And then 10% of people are probably just really, really bad. And they're doing stuff like this, what this detective did. The hyper-competent cop myth, yeah, that seems to be the trail running through. This guy was not hyper-competent. This guy was the exact opposite. He was incompetent. It's just what it is. The sheriff, who was the sheriff when this happened, lost his re-election bid. I don't really have an opinion about that either way. He seemed fine to me. I didn't know much about him. A number of people I talked to, as far as journalists, predominantly, and other Leos, and a variety of people in a variety of capacities around Seattle, they all spoke very highly of John. I read a lot of places, like on Reddit, where a lot of people have a very negative opinion of John, and there have been a number of sexual misconduct allegations and stuff, which I saw, which kind of colored my initial opinion of him. I have not researched those pieces. Again, he lost his re-election bid to another lady by the name of Mitzi, who, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I was a part of that. I don't know if what happened with this influenced anybody. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But yeah, that's kind of a minor note. I did want to add that for anybody who felt that, let's say, I think the general skepticism about my claims of what was happening prior to the video, I think is fine. That's kind of how I approach things too. I think having a scientific and skeptical perspective towards things is good. Trust but verify. Like, I believe you, but I'd like to see some evidence. I think that's totally fine. However, I do want to say, just kind of clarifying, that the sheriff himself, John Urquhart, came out and just days after everything came down and the video came out and said that even if I was doing everything that detective claimed, which was speeding, reckless driving, driving in between rapidly changing lanes, that did not justify the use of force. So, and there's a clip of that on the web. here it is.
Detectives.
Very well. And so let's assume, arguendo, that there was a potentially life-threatening situation. If it were true as alleged that he was traveling 100 miles an hour in that area, what would be the protocol for a traffic stop?
A traffic stop, just like we saw there, up to the point where he walked up with his gun out. I'm not aware of any situation, any traffic stop situation that would justify pulling a gun on a violator like that. My focus is on what my deputy did. I can't control what this individual has done in the past or what he's going to do in the future, but I can control my deputy, and that's what my concern is. I want to find out why he did this, and I want to make sure that he doesn't do it in the future.
Right, because as you say, if he were just behaving in the manner of a squid and wasn't waving the gun around or tending to incite some type of physical violence, there's no need for the reaction of the detective.
Then he should have gotten a ticket for reckless driving.
But in this instance, there was no citation issued.
That's one of the questions we're going to ask him. Why was no citation issued if this person was so dangerous and driving so unlawfully?
I talked a little bit about the punishment or repercussions that I thought were appropriate for this guy, and just to clarify, I do not have any control over any of it, other than the fact that the more I cooperate and the more information I provide and the more open and honest I am about everything, the more likely he is to have the appropriate level of consequences, repercussions, punishment, whatever. In the internal investigation, I do not make the determination. That's up to a major. In the criminal investigation, that's up to King County and what charges they think are appropriate and can stick. So I don't make any of those choices. If the prosecutor decides that there are charges that should be levied, and they need me to be on the witness stand or whatever, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to follow this thing through. And if not, then, well, I did everything I could. An interesting thing I learned, though, is that, again, there are certain laws where if you are in a capacity as a law enforcement officer, you can commit certain crimes, and they're not a crime when you do it. Again, assault and battery, these are all things that can potentially not be crimes if you do it, because of, again, we have this interpretation, what a reasonable officer would do or whatever. Could they make reasonable assumptions about threat levels, which is how a lot of these police officers who have shot and killed people have not been indicted. It's kind of because of that. There's a really interesting podcast that talked about this, which I'll link here, that NPR did, if you want to know more about the details of that. I got back a bunch of information about the detective as far as complaints against him. A local paper in Seattle called The Stranger ran a story about the complaints against the detective prior to his interaction with me, which I'll link, and you should read if you're interested in that. So an interesting thing I figured out is that there's a broken process as far as complaints against law enforcement goes, at least here. I don't know how it's done in other places, it's all local, so maybe other places do it differently. I have a sneaking suspicion they all probably do it the same way, or mostly the same way. So if you, there was a number of things in this guy's record. So for example, I'll give a specific example. He showed up to a lady calls the police and says, "I think my neighbors are poisoning my dog." That's a pretty extreme claim, right? Your dog, basically her dog got sick and she made the assumption it was her neighbors because they had a poor interaction or something. So, you or me might walk into that situation and say, okay, they're both just as likely to be, this person is assumed innocent. This person is a victim maybe of something. It's just as likely her dog just got randomly sick or ate something random around the house that made them sick. These are all just as likely scenarios. But apparently he went to these two elderly women's home, who's this other person's neighbor. They felt that he had threatened them and aggressively accused them of poisoning the dog. My assumption is it's to coax out the truth or whatever, or to get them to admit it. They didn't. Again, they said that they didn't do it. So anyway, I guess more or less nothing happened. But the ladies called and got routed to the supervisor and complained about this and felt that it was very inappropriate and gave them specific details about what they didn't like about this guy's attitude and his actions towards them. So you or I might say that's a complaint right there. That's a complaint against this guy. It's not, actually. So what they did was they said, okay, do you want to file a formal complaint? As if that's not a formal complaint, because a formal complaint is, filling out paper, basically doing what I did, which is that you follow it all the way through. And they didn't do that, and they said they felt happy enough that they had talked to a supervisor, been able to air their grievance, and they felt confident that that was going to create a change in behavior, and that person was going to get reprimanded. Well, that's not what happened at all. It goes in a file, somewhere, but basically he gets a talking to, but it doesn't actually count as a complaint. So later on in his life, when he had another interaction with somebody where he pulled the guy over and berated him, and he felt very negatively impacted, they looked back at his record and said, hey, no formal complaints. This is not a pattern. So nothing done. Again, the person didn't follow through with that supervisor after airing their grievance to file a formal complaint. Yeah, no pattern recognition. So yeah, you might even say that even though this happened with me, he has no pattern of any of this behavior, even though there are documented cases of it happening, because it doesn't count as a complaint because nobody followed through, because I'm sure nobody was encouraged to do that. His boss, do they have incentives to do that? No. Why? I mean, maybe if they think that justice is important, or if they're concerned that this guy is putting a negative face on King County. I mean, maybe they're right, but I mean, we all know bosses that don't do that. We all know that it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility that they just didn't want to deal with it, or fill out the paperwork or go through that. Maybe it's a hassle with the union. Who knows? But that's a problem. That's a massive problem with how we handle complaints with law enforcement. In retail, when I was managing people, if somebody came up to me and said, hey, that employee was really rude to me, and they said this, this, and this, and then they were like, I'm gone, I don't want to be here anymore, you can bet that I would have a conversation, and that would all be documented with my employee, and if that came up again, we would have another conversation, and I would assess it each time. If maybe this person has a problem, right? But again, this isn't normal. This is how they're treating it differently. So I'd say that's a pretty significant issue with our law enforcement, how they handle complaints with people, and how they handle complaints with police officers. So if you have something that happens, and you actually want something to get done about it, you have to file a formal complaint. You need to follow up. Otherwise, you can pretty much assume even if you talk to somebody, nothing's going to get done. At best, it's going to be a conversation, and it's going to be filed in a sheet of paper, and nobody's going to pay attention to it later. I also wanted to, the last thing I wanted to talk about is I just kind of wanted to, again, some people, I wanted to kind of go around the justifications that people were giving for this guy to use his gun and kind of how they don't really add up. So first off, his statement where he thought I was going to run. That doesn't hold water for a variety of reasons. One, he had already ran my plate. If you run my plate, you know my name, you know my address. So you can always find me later. So that doesn't really add up or hold water. So you could also make the assumption, okay, so maybe it was a stolen vehicle. Again, it didn't come back as stolen. So he would have maybe had to steal it from my home, driving it away. You can imagine a scenario. It's very unlikely, but you can imagine a scenario where the bike is stolen, but I haven't called for it and let anyone know that it was stolen. Then yeah, maybe that person would run because they stole a vehicle. And so if he felt that way, what he should have done was radioed for backup from a marked patrol car. I was clearly not driving in a way that was, other than maybe speeding. I mean, I wasn't running through lights or anything like that. So he clearly had the time to do that, and he was in a completely unmarked Ford Edge. It's not like I was going to figure out that he was a cop, just randomly looking behind me. Yeah, he should call the marked patrol car. That's what he would have done if he was serious about me being a danger to people. He didn't do that. Not even close. Not even afterward. At no point did he call in for another patrol car. So that doesn't really hold water. And then lastly, the fact that he would use his gun and then approach me with his gun as a way of getting me to comply and ensure I didn't run. So what was he going to do if I did? The assumption is that if I lean forward, put my bike into first gear from neutral, which it was in because my hands weren't even on the controls, first off, that takes a lot of time. So you could probably just push me over. Again, the hyper-competent cop, he would have just knocked me off. I mean, he also grabbed my shirt briefly before I put my hands up. So he could have just grabbed me off of that. Didn't need a gun for that. So, okay. So then somehow I lean forward. He doesn't knock me off. And then I somehow ride maybe in between. What, he's gonna fire at me as I ride away? Is that really what people think is gonna happen? I think that's what people think was gonna happen. That would not happen. I mean, if he did, that would be that's a terrifying thought. That he would shoot into potentially civilians, other people's cars. He might hit or kill somebody unrelated to me at the potential fact that I might hurt somebody else. That doesn't really add up. rolls right back into that myth of the hyper-confident cop, like that they would somehow just like wound me or nick me or hit me and not anybody else. It's very unlikely. And also, again, like we have non-lethal tools, tasers, nightsticks. These are all things that people, that I assume these people are equipped with. A gun is not required. And, tasing me, I'm going to fall down too. I'm not going to ride off with a taser. Yeah, all these connections don't, I get where people are going, where they're trying to fill reasons. None of this adds up. Again, no person with a law enforcement background has agreed with any of those ideas or that those were reasons why. Nobody. These are just people who don't understand how law enforcement works and have watched too many TV shows and movies, I guess. All right. That's all I got. My next update will hopefully be fairly soon, as soon as I hear about a decision from any of the investigations. And we'll talk details. Cool. Thanks again, everybody.